The thing I remember most about Christianity at this point is the pit preacher that we have at UNC. He stands in a central area, holds up a sign that says "Fear God," and then preachingly yells at everyone about what they should be doing in their lives. And I don't usually stop and listen to him. I usually just walk by because I know he says a lot of mean and judgmental things towards people. It's like, if you don't believe what he believes, then you're wrong and you're gonna go to hell.
If I can accomplish that, I really don't know what I do. That's what happens.
You're a little confused about having sex.
No.
Come on, come on.
So I'm hoping that the people at this church are nothing like the pit preacher. I'm hoping that they're nice and accepting people, but I'm not sure. Yeah, and then in terms of how I think they'll answer my question about the existence of evil, I do have vague memories of the Christian background that I had in elementary school. I know something about Adam and Eve and an apple and eating that, and then that's why there's sin and evil in the world or something like that. So I feel like that's going to be their answer to my question, but I'm not entirely sure, and I guess I'll find out all of these answers tomorrow. If God is supposed to be all-powerful and all-loving,
yeah,
and would grieve this, I mean, why wouldn't God intervene or protect innocent people from things like that?
Yeah. And this is one of the earliest questions that you have. Can God lift a rock that or can God create a rock so large you can't hold it, or can God not intervene? All these kinds of questions, and that's by and large not how we see God working. We take the human experience of loss and the human experience of grief, and talk about how we experience God in that loss. How do we experience God in that grief? And what are we becoming as humans from those experiences? And how might God be using those experiences to create us in ways that were unimaginable before? When in the story of Joseph, if you remember the multicolored coat and the like, he's thrown by his brothers into the pit and left and taken away. Later he's reunited with his brothers, and the word that comes back from Joseph is, you intended this for harm, but God intended it for good. Now, I don't think God intended for his brothers, or that was foreordained that his brothers were going to throw him in the pit and sell him off into slavery, but God took that experience and redeemed it. And I think that's the promise we hold out, is that when we have these horrendous losses and horrendous griefs, those experiences are not beyond God to redeem and to create anew out of them.
Okay, so when bad things happen, it's a growing experience?
I don't think God there's a difference between saying that these were willed by God to happen.
Okay.
I don't think they were willed by God to happen. They're not foreordained or predestined. But I think that's just part of the nature of creation, that God, just as God took the initial chaos and the void and created from it, God's taking the chaos and the void of your life and creating anew from it. Wasn't necessarily willed to be that way, but using the raw material that is there, the raw material of loss, the raw material of grief, and creating anew out of it. I think that part of what happens when we go to a funeral, the people that are immediately grieving, they're experiencing a loss, and it's very hard to come back and say, you know, as the early chapters of Genesis, at every point in creation, and it was good. You know, we talk about creation being good. Well, there's a point where in the middle of that loss, you may not be able to affirm that life is good. And that's where the community comes and surrounds the person who's grieving. And the community, that's part of what the funeral service does. The community around you affirms that life is good. You may not be yet ready to say that, but you're inside a larger community that's going to wait on you. Because someday you're going to be able to voice that affirmation again. And so that's why faith is something I don't think we encounter alone. We're really a part of a faith community. And it's those, you know, friends and family members that surround you. And when you can't say life is good, they say it for you. Prayers for those who are homeless and hungry in our community. Lord, hear our prayer.
Our prayer of help when we need it, and our prayer of thanks when we're grateful. Help us to do all these things as we trust in your love for us and our love for one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you, children. It's so great to see you today. Now you can do several different kinds of things. You can go back to children's choir rehearsal. If you're in the children's choir.
When we talk about God being the creator, I think every moment is being created. That there's not some master plan that we're marching towards.
Okay.
I think the master plan is that God accompany us through whatever is happening.
Then what do you think the purpose of this life is?
The purpose of this life,
Yeah.
I think, is to cooperate with God, to participate with God in the mending of this creation, to enjoy the goodness of this creation, and to delight in the goodness of our Creator.
Bread, blessed it, and broke it, saying, "Take and eat, for this is my body broken for you." In like manner, Jesus took the cup, and pouring it out, he said, "This is the cup of the new covenant, poured out for you and for me, for the forgiveness of sins. As often as you eat of this bread and drink of this cup, do so to remember me."
Vengeance only continues building stone upon stone of past hurt and grievances, whereas resurrection is building the present from God's future.
Well, there are two different forms. I mean, bad things happen to good people. For example, we can talk about, as I was saying, the people acting on self-interest or on vengeance, and those things accumulate, and thus that happens. But there's also, and we can't deny this, somebody wakes up one day with a tumor.
Yeah.
That's that was unbidden, undeserved, unearned, perhaps, and that's left as a more mysterious piece. What we do say in our faith experience is that God accompanies us through those experiences, that we're not left alone in them. We can't fully explain them, but we do hold out the promise that we're not going to go through it alone.
Through structures of past hurt and hate, through ancient systems of prejudice and pride, through entrenched injustice and cries for vengeance. But our hope does not stop at the cost. Our hope is in God's future that is pushing stone away from stone, tombstones from graves. Our hope is in God's deeper fault lines through which a new heavens and a new earth is emerging. Our hope is not in keeping foundations from being shaken, but in birth pains, however painful, a new creation coming into being is. Our hope is that in the shadow of death, Hannah sings. Our hope is that stone is not left upon stone, as Jesus emerges from the tomb. Our hope is that life is being made new, even now. Thanks be to God.
It's a question that's a basic question that underlies philosophies, religions, and so on. How can there be a loving God when we have Assyria, when we have what happened in Paris?
Right.
And so I understand exactly the question that you're raising and how hard it is to understand. The approach here at describing good and evil is to say we'll probably never be able to understand that. We will be able to understand that there are people who are evil and wonder why and how we can help them. And in some cases that may be causes that we can get at. Mental issues, physical issues, things like that. But in the good people, and we can't understand why there are good people who do great things, and we can't turn bad people into good people.
Why would you choose a life of appreciation over understanding? And like, as in,
Excellent.
why?
Okay.
Yeah, why appreciate life and appreciate God and choose to do that as opposed to choosing to like really like understand why things are like that.
Oh, boy. I just read 3 essays by a brilliant physicist, Einstein, on exactly that question, which is very interesting. And he was an extremely articulate discussant of that issue. And his premise is, it isn't an either or, it's an and. That a part of our ability as human beings to create that better life is founded on our ability to understand. Remember earlier on we talked about the physical, people can do bad things because of a physical impairment or because of a mental impairment.
Right.
As we understand more and more about that, we're able to help some of those people have a better and a good life.
But you said is it partially explainable? Because you said it's not fully understood.
Okay, I think you may be asking for something that cannot be answered.
Okay.
But I think part of when we talk about let's say a child is hit by a car and dies, that is an enormous grief.
Right.
And what one does with that experience is one can grieve that experience. We can't go back and bring the child back. We just don't have the possibility of that kind of restitution. We can do things from that. We can take the energy of that experience, we can grieve it and use it to work towards safer traffic laws. We can work to do things from the energy of that experience, but we can't unmake it. And so that's the, is it fully explainable? I don't think saying, well, God had a greater purpose is a help.
Right.
You hear people say things like that, and they're trying to find a way of saying that, well, it was their time.
How do you feel at peace with not understanding?
I think that's one of the, that's where we come back and we talk about how we trust God. And I think that's one of the things we keep, probably the earliest sort of religious formula or faith formula that we have is that God rules, God reigns. And we keep coming back to that. That despite all the chaos that surrounds us, in some fashion, we know that God is in control. We may not know what that means.
So the last episode was based in more Hindu practices. whereas this was a Christian religion. I felt like the Hindu idea was that if you do good, then good will happen to you, and if you do bad things, then bad things happen to you, so you can learn not to do those same bad things to other people. Whereas this is more like not necessarily that things were predestined, but that bad things happen, and that it's more about how you deal with the bad things that happen than necessarily looking back and like trying to do good deeds and learn from them. I appreciated what Clay had to say about evil. As someone who doesn't necessarily believe in this God, it's harder for me to understand something faith-driven when I don't have that same faith. And I appreciate that these people do have that faith, and that's how they how they see evil. But it was just a little easier to understand when Clay was giving me fact-based information. So I immediately think of the attacks in Paris when I think about evil in the world and not understanding why bad things happen to innocent people. I feel like the people in Paris that were injured or killed or harmed in any way did nothing to provoke that attack, and it just really relates to what we're trying to figure out here and how different religions will look at something evil in the world and explain it. What I gather about the Christian belief is that they choose to appreciate over understand evil, so they appreciate God in their life and they appreciate the life that God gave them while they have it, and they try to take bad things that happen and they try to either I feel like it was saying that they should experience like growth from that, like they should either by helping other people who maybe have a mental problem or a physical problem that causes them to treat others badly, to help those people as best they can, or to like if some innocent person dies, for example, to yes, grieve that loss, but also to take what God gives them and be grateful. And I don't know, I feel like that's what I got out of this. Okay, so this was really hard for me to understand, especially because I felt like I feel like the preacher was saying that a lot of evil just can't be explained. It's mysterious. And it's really hard for me to understand why, if God is all-loving and all-powerful, as the belief holds in Christianity, how he would let these bad things happen. And entirely, like, this whole experience, it was a lot of new information, and I feel like it's going to take me a while to really wrap my mind around what they believe exactly and how I view it. I feel like that will probably change over time. Cute mug, where did you get it?
They have coffee.